live. Welcome back to the State of Football, part 52 here, October 13th, 2020. RIC in a place to be. Rick Serritella, telling it like it is when it comes to the NFL draft and everything football here at the Jersey Shore, along with my co-host each and every morning, John Murphy down in New Orleans, of course, the VP and player of personnel director at Toronto Argonauts. And we're talking football. That's what we do. We chop it up here, talk college, NFL draft, developmental leagues. It's your new home for real football talk in the mornings, and we thank you each and every day for joining us and logging on to the NFLDraftBible.com, where, oh, by the way, we have extended our Hurricane Delta relief. All sales of the All Access membership on NFLDraftBible.com will be donated to the Red Cross to help those in need. And the Gulf Coast, in the Gulf Coast region, which, John can attest to for sure. And we've had our own hurricanes here in New Jersey as well. So we definitely feel for all those impacted and affected. Make sure you go to NFLDraftBible.com, subscribe All Access, and you'll get our hard copy book, our PDF. We'll throw in the Scout Speak book by our good friend Neil Stratton. And, oh, by the way, you help a good cause. So, we appreciate all the love and the support, like guys like Charlie Beta in the chat room. We are streaming live on Facebook, Periscope, YouTube, Twitter. Drop us a line, chime in. We love to hear from you. We like to get interactive and get questions and feedbacks from you all. And if you have a topic you want us to discuss, let us know. We'll break it down for the people because that's what we do here on the State of Football. So, John, I was saying, I thought I had an early night in bed at halftime. I was rolling over, one eyed open. I said, this game's in the can. Woke up, saw your text, had to rewatch the second half. And boy, oh boy, a thriller. We called it a shootout. Took a while for this Saints team to catch up. But, again, say what you want. Drew Brees might have lost something off the fastball, but he still knows how to win. And he compensates that experience for the lack of physical attributes, whereas, Justin Herbert, this is as good of a good-looking young quarterback that we've seen enter the league in quite some time now.
Yeah, and you saw, and I think, early they took control of the game the way that the Lions did a week ago. So now this is something that for sure with the bye week, that you always hear that. You'd rather be able to learn something and grow from it after a W than a loss. Clearly, the Saints would have felt much differently at 2-3 going into the bye week, especially with the Panthers, playing better than expected, and Tampa Bay, has figured out how to win after losing to the Saints in week 1. But still, those big plays that you saw in the first half and almost saw cost them the game, at the end there. One guy in Mike Williams was able to make a lot of plays vertically down the field, and if you're playing against Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin, if you're playing against Robbie Anderson, with games coming up, you're going to have to figure out a different way to cover some of that stuff. And it seems like it's more of the communication on the back end. You're not just getting beat physically, you're getting beat because you're not playing good team defense. I think that's something, Dennis Allen will, be able to use the bye week to see what have they done, what is not working, and then try to transfer that over and look to see improvement. For them to go from where they're at, which is a contender, to being what they were thought to be, which was the contender, they have to improve the pass rush. Marcus Davenport played, Cam Jordan played, Trey Hendrickson, still your best pass rusher. That's great for Trey, not great for team defense. Cam Jordan still has only, sack and a half, through 5 games. Got to see that pick up. You love what you see out of Demario Davis, on a weekly basis. Got to get rid of these penalties. They are for sure the most penalized team in terms of costly penalties. Way too much PI, and 19 first downs, in 5 games given up to the penalty. That's not winning. That's not winning football. The other thing is, too many turnovers, that you got to be careful when you have turnovers in a game, because that can really turn the momentum around there. So you don't mind what Breeze and them are doing. They're manipulating the clock, some at times with using the passing game with Kamara. to offset, some of the stuff with the running game. And then I'm always still going to be nervous that, pulling Breeze at different times. Now you're trying to get people off their rhythm of when you're putting in this Taysom Hill scenario, and you do it twice in the red zone. That's a little dicey. It can get a little dicey. And if your season ends, we've seen how their seasons have ended. If you ever make a play call like that and Drew Brees isn't on the field at the biggest moment when your season's on the line, that's going to be a hard pill to swallow if that really is the last game he ever plays for you. And if you are then putting, the franchise somewhat in the hands of Taysom Hill, moving forward. But a win is a win. On the flip side, man, I keep, saying it. I know it sounds, you can't come on Monday and talk about guys whose jobs are in trouble, based on their record, and not say it. At some point, Anthony Lynn and the Chargers have to win some of these games. 13 one-score losses in the last basically 21 games played. I mean, they're right there, to win a game again. The kids faced, Drew Brees, Patrick Mahomes, and Tom Brady in 3 of his first 4 starts. He's played right with them. He's not turned the ball over extensively. Last night, they're playing with a makeshift right side of the O-line. No Eckler. Mike Williams only. Okay, they have Mike Williams and Hunter Henry, but, the other 3 guys catching balls are off the practice roster. Kudos to Anthony Lynn. And this is what I'll leave you with. If you want to know what kind of guy and what kind of head coach, what kind of person that you have, first offensive play last night for the Chargers is run on a speed sweep, handoff to Tyron Johnson, who grew up 5 minutes from the Superdome, playing at home, first time getting a chance to be in the Dome since he played as a high school senior. And Anthony Lynn calls the first play of the game, hands the ball off to the kid, gets him a touch in the Superdome, first play of the game. So now that's the kind of guy, that's the kind of head coach, that's the kind of person you have. We just got to start seeing some W's here soon. Like this season, I think, is one thing. Next year, they have to be doing, and I believe they will, they have to be doing what the Raiders are doing a year from now. Right? They have to win some games against plus teams next season because you have it. You have the quarterback, you have Eckler when he's healthy, and you have the defense in terms of the pass rush. And the good news is you've developed some linebacker and DB guys minus Derwin James, and minus some of your other, top-end performers. So you've been able to develop some at linebacker and DB, not playing with Derwin James, no Brian Bulaga, no Eckler, and you had the Saints pinned down 20-3 with a rookie quarterback in start number 4. You're on the right track in San Diego. You just really want to see them start winning some games because Anthony Lynn, that's highly impressive that an NFL coach could kind of manage all those things. And on the flip side, you got to give kudos to the Saints for sticking to that thing that there is no one player bigger than the team when you have the schnooks to publicly put your information out there, about what happened, and then have the guts to, on Monday Night Football with a win that you need and an undermanned team, you really could have played Michael Thomas, but in the long haul for the Saints, that really repositions the power that's there, and it gives Michael Thomas a really great opportunity now to prove back to himself and his teammates that he is a team first guy, because you can get into an argument or a fight, but when it's time to settle that down and get back to work, if you can't kind of hone your maturity and get your emotions back in check, good for the Saints for showing that not one no one player is bigger than the team.
Well, there's no doubt who's the boss in New Orleans. Sean Payton's got the cajoons to do it. He's benching Hall of Fame quarterbacks for gadget guys and holding out, arguably the best wide receiver in the game, to control that locker room. And I'll tell you what, if Michael Thomas now buys in, what Emmanuel Sanders is doing now, it's hitting on all cylinders. that could be a very formidable 1-2 punch with Jared Cook there underneath as a security blanket. So the Saints looking to get back to where we expected them to be. And, to your point with Coach Lynn, it reminds me of Tony Dungy in Tampa. Really a lot of great positives. Everything's good. It's like, hey, it's not that you're not a great coach, Tony. You just couldn't get him over the hump. Gruden comes in and gets the job done with Tony's team. Say what you want. Gruden got it done. You start wondering now, at what point is Lynn just the engine that can't get over that hump? And, kudos to Justin Herbert, a lot of criticisms similar to that of Eli Manning when he came in with the New York Giants, and they said, he just doesn't have the DNA to be a leader. He's, too all shucks, kind of personality. And, while Eli's was more down south, all shucks, Herbert's more of the Cali surfer, like, oh, cool, man. But I'll tell you what, he's as cool as a cucumber under pressure to come out against 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks in Mahomes and Brady and Breeze and actually look like the better quarterback in a couple of those games. Pretty impressive stuff. You start wondering, hey, is this guy the best quarterback from this year's draft class? So we'll talk about it. We'll keep an eye on it. Of course, Friday, we've got our Football Friday preview where we will preview the NFL upcoming action. There is one on Tuesday Night Football here tonight, John, and our good friend Ralph Ventry was kind enough to give us a sneak peek on yesterday's show. But this one here now is Buffalo going into Tennessee, where you kind of wonder, like, okay, could we have flipped this home road game? Like, do we really need to go to the facility where the COVID has been, highly active? But 3.5-point road favorites, the Bills are, I would imagine, with Tennessee not really practicing much the last couple of weeks, that the Bills go in there and take care of their business. But, hey, Tennessee is undefeated. You could say they just got well rested. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, well, and depending on who you listen to, they've been practicing, just not official practices. Guess we'll leave that for another day. Yeah, I'd like to take the Titans because that would potentially extend my lead. That might be the right way to go.
On me now, I haven't gotten around to catching up on the standings. Did last night put you over the top on me?
I don't know. I think the Browns the Browns may have helped me. I'm gonna guess that you correctly picked the Raiders over the Chiefs, or did you get off the bandwagon too soon?
Yeah, I got to go back and look. I think I might have taken the Raiders.
I think it's going to still be within one game, regardless there. But yeah, that's the interesting part of this is, the one thing about football, it's how we will see how connected these guys are, right? They can do all of the other stuff behind the scenes while it's hugely important to playing football and to pay attention to these rules and not be doing what the Titans are doing. We'll see how connected and collective they are in the sense of everything Vrabel. They know what they've been through. They know what they're hearing. It can be a galvanizing, situation to hear everybody kind of, rooting for you to now come out tonight. And right, there's Bills fans, there's football fans, there's all kind of folks rooting for the Bills to just go in there and lay one on them, and say, well, like, hey, that's what you get for doing what you're doing. But all things being equal, it's hard to imagine, not that the Bills are a favorite, but that, you're undefeated at home, minus this COVID stuff going on. If this game was played, a week or 8-9 days ago, the Titans probably would have been, considered the favorite, or at least even, in this scenario. So now the interesting part is, can you play physically when you've been off for 2 weeks, when you didn't have a whole preseason? Well, you're good for Derrick Henry for, 20 to 25 carries, if you want it this evening. I think it's still a question mark with a handful of guys, that are they 100%? And if they are, COVID, free to play. Well, how much work have they gotten in? And will the quarterback, timing there, be an issue? I think the Bills have enough defense to win a game, even if it is sort of that heads up, matchup. If this isn't a blowout, type scenario by the Bills and the Titans have stayed together, which they seemingly, really have, I think it's right there in line with the Bills winning. That's the right score margin, there, that 3.5, the 3.5 would kind of get you if you were, if you're looking at it from that perspective. But I think the Bills have enough to win on the road. And again, this is another one of those games, just like we just saw with the Colts, and the Browns, that you're sitting there with a feature opportunity. Minnesota the other day at 1-3. If you're 2-3 after beating Seattle on the road, you're headed one way. If you're 1-4, you're kind of headed the other, direction. For the Titans, you now have this game, and now you have that Steelers game change down the road. The Bills, you've started undefeated. If you go to Tennessee and lose, we could now see the Bills on a little wobbly streak here in the sense of it's Tennessee, Kansas City back-to-back. If you win, you're now in control of your destiny because you play the Chiefs after beating the Titans. You could get a stranglehold by putting 2 losses on the Chiefs and you be 6-0. You're starting to, make it be that Kansas City has to come to Buffalo in January or February, to play for an AFC title. That's a different situation, right? So tonight's game has implications immediately, much bigger implications if you're the Buffalo Bills. One of these teams is leaving having a chance to challenge Kansas City and Pittsburgh for home field down the rest of the way. The other one has a chance in their division, but is a lot more likely to be in that 3-4, range seated wise, because we go from talking about the Bills the way we are to you lose at Tennessee and then you play Kansas City. All of a sudden, it could be an issue. I think it's a close game. I like what I've seen out of the Bills. I trust what I've seen so far out of Josh Allen, that combination of the run game and Josh Allen will give a defense that hasn't played, in 2 weeks, a little bit of a fit. But it'll be very interesting to see how cohesive the Titans have been over this whole time frame and how they react and respond, to an NFL game after dealing with all this.
Yeah, they're kind of the Houston Astros of the National Football League now. And I'll tell you this, if Buffalo pulls off the win tonight and in Kansas or versus Kansas City, they then become the favorites in the AFC. And I'm telling you, Buffalo is making me a believer. And, I'll tell you, I think that they're going to take Tennessee out of their element. I always thought the Titans were best when they got a lead early. Let Derrick Henry do his thing, eat the clock, kill the clock, control the game, time of possession. I always thought that's when Tennessee's at their best. If Buffalo goes up early, takes them out of their element, and now they're suddenly having to play a game of catch-up, well, I will take Josh Allen over Ryan Tannehill, despite Tannehill playing pretty well, bouncing back from the putrid playoff passing performances he had.
Right. And that's for sure. McDermott's a defensive guy, and how they play their game and what their decision-making normally is. But tonight, you win the toss, I would take it instead of deferring. Defensive coaches really like to defer, try to double down on getting the ball at the end of the half and getting it, to start. But I think if you took control of it, and Singletary with, play action and some Josh Allen, heroics early on in the game, and you could control the clock for 6 or 8 minutes and get a score on the board, even if it's 3 or 7, you hold them one time and you got a chance to go up, 6-10-0. It definitely can change the momentum of the game of making the Titans feel like they have to kind of hurry up to get into their offense. And if they can't just lean early on Derrick Henry, it can be a different game. If they can lean on Derrick Henry and you limit the amount of times that Josh Allen has the ball, you're going to probably have a game that's lower scoring and then the Titans are right there in the line. Because in a close game, then we got the battle of the kickers, and that's gone interesting this season for a lot of different teams, as we saw last night. Dink off the post, there at a 50-yarder to win the game. So you feel for that kid and you feel for the Chargers, but I got a feeling, if you play a close game and you get down to that, battle for the kickers, that's why the Titans made that call and, switched off of a young kid, Greg Joseph, for, Gostkowski. And, he's had his moments, both pro and con, but, he has certainly seems like he may have kind of turned the corner in the last 2 weeks and giving them what they want, which is a credible veteran kicker.
And I'll say this. I enjoy this new rule change, moving the extra point back, because there's no more complacency. Like, you cannot get up and go to the fridge or go use the restroom after that touchdown anymore. Like, you need to see if that extra point goes through. It's just not a gimme anymore. And it's really brought an extra excitement to the game, because that 1 point can really dictate how you're managing your timeouts and the end of the game and everything that comes into play.
Yeah, well, I mean, it came down last night. First quarter, you're up 20 instead of 21-3. And at the end of the game, you got a missed field goal and a missed extra point, and you lost 30-27
points. Was it 2 missed extra points?
I think it was one last. So still though, 4 points and you lost by 3.
There you go. The state of football here, breaking it down for the people every weekday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, your new home for real football talk in the mornings. Oh, by the way, we've got a new college football pregame show on Saturday mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern, the NFL Draft Tailgate. It's your college football pregame show with an NFL Draft slant, along with John Murphy, Ryan Roberts, and David Turner, who I see is up early over there in Arizona, joining us in the chat room. Shout out to all of our chat room peeps. David Turner, Charlie Better Than You. Of course, I got the Maverick Sports Gear representing. Make sure you check out our friends at Maverick Sports Consulting. And they had some interesting tweets. If you want to know who some GM and head coaching candidates are, David Turner has put that out there, and we'll be lucky enough to pick his brain on Thursday, I believe, when he joins us to talk some football. We are going to talk some NFL draft now, shift some gears to some things we saw this past weekend, some movers and shakers on the big board. And, since we transitioned out of the NFL with the kicker, John, let's transition into college football draft preview with the kicker, because we don't get to spend too much time on special teams, but kickers and punters are people too. And we'll throw you in there, 2 long snappers, when we get a chance. But this kid from Florida, man, he's got a boomerang on him.
Yeah, and the thing is that when you're that level of consistency for 2 years straight, and then follow it into your third year, this is a kid 17 for 19 each of his first 2 years, consistently making a lot of kicks, from 45 plus. And last week hit a 53-yarder, so he's hit a 53 and a 55. Perfect on the season for Florida. So Evan McPherson is a guy that, whichever year, and it's very, you said it, you mentioned it. Hard to imagine a kicker hearing that a kicker's declaring for the draft, but it is a possibility when you see everything going on in the NFL and you see how many teams. I mean, Jacksonville, it's literally now on number 5, headed to number 6, there. So kicker tryouts on the regular, down there in Jacksonville until Josh Lambo gets healthy. And we've seen other teams, having and doing the same, where, yes, it's partially the COVID era and teams wanting to have that guy in the building, in case there's an injury for the future. But here's a guy that would really have a shot to be taken in the top, 50 picks, no doubt, a possible no-brainer, second round pick to a, contending team or a young team that wants to make sure that part of the game is not a question mark. When you have a chance to win, that you win those type of games, so to me, the 50 plus yarders are great, but the high level of consistency from 45 plus, 5 total missed kicks in 3 years, and you're playing in some really big contests, week in and week out. So, that under the pressure and under the big lights, he can perform. I think Evan McPherson is somebody that will be the outlier, in whichever draft class he decides to be in this year's, or next year's, because it's very rare, rare air that you hear that you could take a guy early. And I think the only thing Evan McPherson would want to make sure is, well, maybe hope the Buccaneers maybe don't draft me, because that's where kickers have gone to die in the draft. So just make sure Jason Light goes to a different game that weekend and doesn't catch the Florida action, because they're better off dealing with kickers the way that they have, just not through the draft, there. But yeah, all joking aside, for a state that's had some issues, with kickers in the past, Evan McPherson has done a great job. Now the one thing I ask you, Evan, is if it does come down to a long field goal to win the game this week against LSU, maybe you can push it to the right.
Well, I'll tell you, Evan, if you're listening, I am 1,000% for you declaring early. You cannot elevate your draft stock any higher. And it's a product of what you've done, but also what the NFL has done. The kickers in the NFL have set you up to maximize your draft stock.
Yeah. Not to mention, I do not want to see a Ryan Roberts mock draft with you at 29 to New England or something, okay? And, we don't need to see you get all the way to the first round, because I don't know if anybody ever had back in the day Janikowski in the first round, but kudos if you had Janikowski to the Raiders or in the first round at all. So I guess he's going to have to come up with a nickname for himself. Seabass. There was quite the
Easy Mac
confident guy, quite the kicker as it turned out to be for where he got picked.
It was worth the selection. No, I mean, you could argue he's a borderline Hall of Famer.
Well, let's just leave it at this. And I know, Turner's in there, so we got to keep it kind of, keep it on the level. In that time frame, he was as good a pick as they were making. So we'll leave it at that. They were doing some things they were doing some head scratchers. That's my guy. That's the favorite person I've ever.
Thursday ready, baby.
that is the most favorite person I've ever gotten a chance to meet for 5 minutes. And the factor that he took 5 minutes for a teenage kid that got off the plane at LAX and shook my hand in front of his car. He was actually meeting. It was Allo Casal was on the same flight that I was on with my sister, who was going for a job interview. And I noticed him only because he was wearing an all white, that old suede sweatsuit. And I made a comment to him on the flight, and it was about a week after the NFL draft. And he came up to me at my sister and I at the airport, said, "Hey, I got somebody that your brother would like to meet." And I'm just waiting for my bags. I'm a 16, 17-year-old kid. We walk outside, old school, like Miami Vice, big limousine. Al Davis, got out, shook his hand, couldn't have been a nicer person, but, just for me, that was the greatest thing ever, being a New Yorker and knowing that he was and stuff like that. So all those years later, when I did meet David Turner and get a chance to intern and work with them, there was never a better day than throwing on that shirt or, anything related to the Raiders, because it just, knowing that it was a guy that, came from your neighborhood and made it so big and did everything he did for the game. But yeah, there were some hicks in that time frame that we'll just leave it as a good selection for Sebastian Janikowski, and we'll just leave it for that.
No doubt. Well, hey, we're talking football here on the State of Football, weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern. Of course, NFLDraftBible.com, your home for the virtual NFL Draft Bible edition 2021 is now available. You don't have to wait till next year for this year's draft. We've brought it to you. It's the first time we've ever done that in the history of the NFL Draft Bible. So log on today, go all access. Make sure you sign up for that. We are donating 50% of all sales this week to the Red Cross Hurricane Delta Relief Fund. So please support the cause, support us, and we'll support them. We appreciate you supporting us right now. Shout out to all our chat room people. Charlie, I'm better than you. David Turner, DC, Daniel Cassidy's in the room. Tony G, back at it again. So good to see the usual suspects and criminals in the chat room. The names have changed to protect the innocent. One thing that doesn't seem to be changing now is it's a spicy Tua type of day. Unfortunately, John, Reggie Roberson now 2 years in a row. Last year with the foot. This year, I think it's the knee. He is once again out for the season. Missed 5 games last year. Is going to miss a handful of games this year. And we'll take them 2 at a time. Andre Cisco, the other big injury this week with the Syracuse safety who we had pegged for the first round, now suffers an ACL. You wonder, with his eligibility still remaining, what his future holds and the decision that he'll make. But 2 big injuries this past weekend in college football.
Yeah, and the thing with Cisco is, and this was Justin, our buddy Justin Van Fulpen had kind of brought it up to me. We're finding out that the severity of his injury, but this happened in pregame 2 weeks back. So he tweaked himself in pregame. They held him out, to be cautious. Swelling goes down, goes and gets an MRI, and the worst fears are met there. So not only does Syracuse lose, their best defender and probably a guy that, could have likely been a first-round pick. Now, in all likelihood, the smarter move, would be to take the surgery, rehab from it, come back and play, next year. If not, you're looking at, likelihood that you would fall in the draft because you would pretty much be a medical guy, for teams next year. I think the same when it comes to Roberson. Unsure if this would mean getting hurt during a COVID fall season. Is there any kind of red shirt or medical opportunity, for him? If not, you could see with the potential that he has that maybe a late round, type thing, but this could now cause him to be more seen as a PFA type. So the bigger things, if you're following the draft, will be, with Cisco, it's a decision he should make to come back. With Roberson, it would be, does he have that opportunity? Have they played too many games this year? How will they judge that type of stuff, as the NCAA, in terms of giving somebody a medical break that they may not have gotten otherwise, and allow him to come back? Because when you're coming off something like that and you're in the middle of a rehab and clubs aren't sure, Roberson, who might have been a mid-round type guy, it's probably going to be 7th, to PFA, and then a team can invest in you. We've seen teams do that. Like I said, I know last year, Tim Scott, from Old Dominion, Kansas City just sat on him for the year, signed him right after the draft with the intention of basically, giving him the year to rehab and recover. There with Cisco, when if your play level can get you to be a first round pick, I'm not sure you want to, be taken with, a second or third round pick. Maybe a team that has, multiple selections in that time frame might take you earlier and have the willingness to sit. But, it's a totally different style injury. And when it happened, you saw it didn't really work out with Sidney Jones and the Eagles. If you're drafting, Cisco to be the player that he's been, and it's going to happen midway or into his rookie season before he's ready to, really play, 2021 is going to be a write-off, in the NFL in all likelihood. So, kind of tougher road to manage for Cisco when there was so much expectation at the end of this year that he's declaring and, going into the draft. So disappointing, hugely disappointing for both of those young men. So we'll just, root for them to get healthy and continue to evaluate them once they are.
Yeah, some tough injuries there. And with Cisco, for me, the concern is like, hey, is this guy too ripped up? I mean, because he's just jacked. I mean, shredded. It's like watching my Yankees. Some of these guys, Judge and Stanton, I know, seriously, I mean, they're so jacked up, right, from head to toe. You wonder, like, are they just too jacked up with something's just going to rip? And now that's a legitimate concern there for Cisco. So I say, hey, come back, show that you can get through the season, be healthy, be explosive, and that's really a 2-year rebound with that type of injury. So I think that also comes into the equation. All right, we've got Ross Dellenger coming up at 9:40 from Sports Illustrated to kind of cover some of the college football landscape news. You're right, Tony G in the chat room. Skylar Thompson, the Kansas State quarterback, we saw him produce some big wins this year. Another guy probably going to have to come back now next year. And he was really a fringe borderline draftable prospect to begin with. The big upset victory, I think it was over Oklahoma early on, definitely caught some attention there. What's caught my attention, John, before we pop on Ross, is these Tar Heels, and we were going back and forth with Turner and Ryan and UNC whipping up on Virginia Tech this past weekend. They're on the outside looking in at number 5. Suddenly the ACC is kind of dominating the power rankings here, and I'm not so sure I'm ready to put North Carolina in the same echelon as Georgia and Alabama, who are going to play each other this week, or even Clemson. But I will say, I think North Carolina beats Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's name is giving them the slight advantage there, but early on, college football playoff rankings will be coming out. How do you kind of see the top 4 or 5 teams there? Do you agree with how they're ranked right now? Clemson, kudos to that team. I mean, Dabo Swinney is an excellent re-recruiter, right? He could have had a number of these guys jump off to the NFL, and they could be barren, kind of like the LSU team this year. But instead, he's got guys buying in, coming back, even as assistant coaches who could be, moving on to greener fields here. But Clemson, I think, you can't argue with them being number 1. It's just after that, I have some questions.
Right. I think some of it will play itself out this week, right? If it's a close game, and it's not fair, it's not, it's clearly not fair. But if Georgia wins by a field goal, Georgia will stay obviously undefeated and in the top, group. Alabama will slide, but not too far. Georgia gets beat by a field goal. Alabama obviously will stay 1. Georgia will slide out of the top 4, and an undefeated team will take that, take that spot. Now, what we have coming up in about 3 weeks is Notre Dame and Clemson. Now, can we get to that game with 2 undefeated teams the way you have the Alabama-Georgia? And can North Carolina, that now you're in the rare air, right? You're now in the scenario that you've wanted to be in, that Mac Brown promised and he has delivered, but every week until you get to another game that's like the magnitude of Virginia Tech, you have every team giving you their best shot, right? And we said it, like, the good news is they've won some games here, minus Sam Howell being the best player on the field for them. I'd have some concern after watching last week with Virginia Tech using a variety of quarterbacks, and how once they were up, well, it went from 42 or 35 to 14 to all of a sudden, a 1-score game at a certain point. So the blowout happened early and then it happened late. But in the middle part, Virginia Tech was able to reel off 21 or 28 straight points, right? So when you watch Virginia Tech, what they were able to do once they got that North Carolina defense kind of on the run, and they did it with the backup quarterback coming in, it would give me some concerns that, Notre Dame, with what they have offensively, could give them some issues, and win a shootout. And Clemson is still probably, I don't think Clemson would do to them what they did to Miami, but it still may be a 10-point Clemson, win against what we've seen out of the best of North Carolina and the best of Clemson. But if you just meet up and you get a good football game, it's still probably a 10-point, difference between them and Clemson. And then the interesting thing is, by the time we get to that matchup in November, I believe it's November 7th, Notre Dame and Clemson, we'll start seeing, the Pac-12, we'll start seeing the Ohio State. So, is USC going to be really that legitimate, to be thought of as a top 10 team if they play their conference schedule. Is there an outlier out there? And who is that team? Because it could be Minnesota, and they're the hot, they're the kind of the hot team, in the Big Ten. Purdue could be a team that makes a little noise. They got Rondell Moore back. They have some weapons. I think they can score. Some, is Minnesota or Purdue? Because if Minnesota's really ready for prime time, they have a lot of weapons, and PJ Fleck is going to get the most out of that group. And they're the one team that has a good enough quarterback, and running that kind of sideshow wildcat situation that you have to prepare for every week. That's a team that could give Michigan or Ohio State kind of a run for their money if you were looking for who's going to do what North Carolina's done in the next crop of teams that starts playing. Yep. Minnesota might be that team.
All right, well, let's talk about it with Ross Dellenger. He joins us now from Sports Illustrated, doing great things there, a handful of great topics that we want to try to cover in this quick 10 minutes, but let's welcome him onto the show. Thanks for taking some time here out of your schedule, Ross. I know you got another interview coming up. You're a busy man these days. How goes it this morning?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing well, man. Kudos to you, all the great work that you and Pat Ford and the crew are doing at Sports Illustrated. A couple things that caught my attention, and I'll jump right into it, are the columns that you did on two interesting head coaches. I'll take them one at a time here. First, Jackson State, Deion Sanders. Incredible the amount of booster money coming in, ticket sales. I saw the social media explosion going on. Is this a legitimate, real deal investment on Deion's part, or is this just kind of him getting his feet wet so he could eventually take over the Florida State job?
Well, I don't think anybody spends their whole life dreaming of being the head coach at Jackson State for 30 years. So I would imagine he's going to use that job like you would think anybody else or most young, somewhat young coaches would, as some kind of stepping stone. And I think they know that, and I spoke to some boosters there into the program, and they were pretty clear they need to utilize the time that Deion is there. They need to utilize that best of their ability. And so I think that you're going to see that they're going to build some facilities and renovate some things. And I think you'll see Deion's presence in the city and on campus. Even city officials, they're going to try to do everything they can to market him and bring money to that city and resources and things like that. So I think they know they might not have him forever, especially obviously if he's successful, that he'll potentially leave and go somewhere else. But they're going to use the time that he's there as best they can to improve Jackson State and the city of Jackson.
Hey, Ross, pleasure to meet you and talk to you. What have you seen so far? So we're heading into the middle of October now, heading toward November. What are you most excited for? Is it a team that you've seen so far that's surprising? Is it the fact that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 are going to be playing soon? Like, what do you think is the next? I just mentioned Minnesota as a possible team that could follow in the footsteps of what North Carolina has done early in the year. We're having this kind of very interesting fall season where part one was the teams that are playing. Part two is now everybody else that's jumping into the mix. Who are you most excited to see and why?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year, right? I think we've had like almost 30 games postponed or canceled, and it's been crazy. I saw just yesterday where Baylor had like 30 players or something positive and like 14 more staff members. I mean, you've got some hot spots and stuff, but so that's been a whole that, and I think obviously COVID is impacted what we're seeing on the field. I think no spring practice and minimum summer workouts are impacting some things on the field. I think because of the somewhat empty stadiums, you've got road teams having more success than probably they ever will. They're probably going to be better road record than ever from road teams this year. You've got offenses really have having the defense's number so far. That's kind of been a national trend for 10, 15 years, but I think you're really seeing it this year. So as far as what obviously, the Big Ten and those guys come back, I think next week. It's going to be really cool to kind of to just see some of those games and see. We never thought we would see these teams play in the fall, and so they're going to be coming back. So it's going to be exciting to see like the Ohio States play. I don't think there's any huge game the opening week except Ohio State, Nebraska, which might end up being a 50-point game, but it has a lot of drama to it, obviously, from what's happened with Nebraska over the course of the offseason. So certainly excited for that one.
Ross Dellenger here from Sports Illustrated, joining us on the state of football. You mentioned Ohio State, Ross, and I think they're going to have something to say about the college football playoffs when it's all said and done. Right now, Georgia and Alabama are going to play this weekend. John thinks, there's a chance that Georgia wins that game by a field goal. Alabama still stays in that top 4 contention. Suddenly, the ACC looks pretty good now with Clemson, Notre Dame, North Carolina. I'm curious to know, is there a team we're not talking about outside of Ohio State that can crash that party? And also curious to get your thoughts. Does the Pac-12 deserve a seat at this round table just playing a 7-game schedule?
Well, it is going to be a weird year with the CFP committee. It's going to be probably the toughest decision they've ever had. Usually they're juggling between 12-1 versus 12-0 or 13-1 versus 12-0, or 13-0. It's going to be odd for them to potentially have a 10-1 versus 7-0 or 8-0, or a 9-1 versus a 9-2 or something like that. I mean, it could have we could be in that situation. It could certainly happen. And so, while it would be hard for me to see an 8-0 Pac-12 team leapfrog any undefeated, obviously, in any other conference that plays more games, you're probably not going to have a lot of undefeated this year. I think that's what we're going to see, and that's what we're already seeing in the SEC. In fact, after Georgia and Alabama play, there's going to be only the winner of that game. There's only going to be the one SEC team that's undefeated, still undefeated. So it's going to be – I don't think you're going to have a lot of undefeated teams. So the Pac-12 might have a chance, especially with the Big 12 and what they've done. They've kind of, in a way, they've shot themselves out of it. And you wonder if, a Pac-12 team does go undefeated, it feels like this year's shaping up to be a situation where they really might have a shot to get in.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah. So when you've looked at what's happened so far, how do you see, is there a Heisman in your mind? Like, who was your Heisman candidate minus the COVID situation? And has that changed? Do you see somebody now? Could you get all this out of the way, right, in terms of everybody that's played September, October? Is it going to give an advantage to Justin Fields or a wild card guy to play all his football November, December, and then have it be when when people are going to make their decisions that they got to see all of your season kind of when everybody was playing? So will it be, a guy that could kind of chase down a Trevor Lawrence or a Travis Etienne because they're playing all their football crunched into a condensed schedule?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I really didn't think of that, but yeah, those teams in the Big Ten and the Pac-12 will have a little bit of an advantage because they're coming in on the back stretch when we're all focused on football and everybody is playing. So yeah, that's an interesting point. As far as my Heisman, list, it's tough, especially after this weekend, not to circle Travis Etienne at Tennessee. All right, Clemson. He's been really impressive. The guy is just probably should be playing somewhere in the NFL. I think a lot of people in his situation would have left last year. And not far behind him is his quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. He's played incredible. It's been fun to watch that team and fun to watch those two guys now for almost 2 or 3 years or something go at it. It's crazy. They keep them there and they continue to do great things. De'Aaron King from Miami would have been in the top up until that last game. Clemson really shut him down, and that's going to really hurt his chances, I think, down the stretch probably. But it's hard to move past the two Clemson guys. It really is so far. But you've got a lot of guys obviously playing really well. Again, it's going to hurt because they lost this past weekend. But Kyle Trask and the tight end at Florida, Kyle Pitts, were playing incredible, and the two Kyles. But having a loss, man, we all know how much that does hurt Heisman chances. And I wonder, where the situation is there. It just feels like we're setting up that if Clemson goes undefeated in the regular season, which I'm sure they will, that either Travis or Trevor will be, two of the top three and probably take home that award.
Ross Dellenger here, Sports Illustrated. I know you've got a boogie, Ross. One last one for you. We mentioned at the top of the segment, Deion Sanders. Another recent column you did was on Billy Napier at Louisiana Lafayette, where John is down in his neck of the woods. And I thought it was interesting that here's a guy who could have got a bigger job, who could have left for more money, but stayed because of what he's built and the quality of team that he's constructed. We're seeing it on the field this year. Again, kind of like similar what I asked you about Neon Deion. Is this inevitable that he takes another? I mean, he's making less than what some of these assistants. I mean, Bo Pelini's making 2-3 times what Billy's making there.
Yeah, it probably is an eventuality that he's going to leave. Billy is a little bit of a different guy. I think a lot of coaches probably would have left with some of the opportunities that were presented to him last offseason. He decided to stay, and he knew what kind of team he was having at UL. They'll play on Wednesday night, a big undefeated Sun Belt matchup against Coastal Carolina. UL is probably the favorite to win their division and compete for the third straight year for the Sun Belt Championship. They beat Iowa State, obviously, got into the rankings for the first time in 25 years, since they got into the top 25 rankings first time since like 1940, I think, at the school. So he's done an incredible job there. And I think it's eventuality that he'll leave. I'm not sure it's going to happen this year because I don't think we're going to have the coaching turnover this year that we normally do. You talk to people in the industry, and just because of the financial strain and the COVID year and all that, it doesn't seem like we're going to have those coaching changes because of the affordability of, $10, $20, $30 million buyouts. I'm not sure how it looks when you have a bunch of layoffs and furloughs in the athletic department and then you spend $20 million to fire a coach. So I'm not sure it's going to happen as much this year. So he might be around Lafayette a little bit longer.
Makes a lot of sense.
I tell you what, I've mentioned it when they've brought up Dabo's name associated with the Texans or things like that. If you want to look at long range, now it would be long range. He is front and center in line if he just holds his water and doesn't ever make any mistakes with where he moves to, that if a Dabo Swinney ever moves on, or like I mentioned, if Dabo ever is the long-term replacement at Alabama, Billy Napier is on, believe it or not, is on the short list at both of those programs. He's been there. He's been at Alabama. Mm-hmm. He's been at Clemson. He's tight with those guys in terms of his reputation with them. And don't forget, this is a just 40, right? We're not talking about a guy who's 55, late in their career. He's 40, 41, right, Ross?
Yeah, 41. Mm-hmm.
He's a young dude that could be very comfortable, right? He's from the South. I believe he was born and raised in Tennessee. He's very comfortable at UL Lafayette in terms of non-coaching, non-football, okay, being, kind of in that setting. And he could sit there and win double-digit games, on the regular, pick off a team or, two here and there, when they're playing them, and kind of ride that, into a legitimate job. I'm not sure that he will take that just a SEC job, right? Like, I don't think he'll just take a ACC job. I don't see, I don't want to throw Vanderbilt under the bus, but, I don't know if he would take a job like that. But he would be the perfect kind of guy for a program that's rebuilding because he has done a fantastic job there.
He has, yeah. I could see that going to Alabama and Clemson, that for sure.
Interesting stuff. Hey, Ross, I know you got a jet. Great stuff here. Keep up the great work at Sports Illustrated. We enjoy your coverage. Make sure you go follow him at Ross Dellenger. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, there you have it. Ross Dellenger giving us some good information. Napier guy, John, is a guy that, you said it, from Clemson staff to Alabama staff, and now sitting pretty to capitalize on all the hard work that he's accomplished. Final thoughts, just wrapping up that segment.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, that would not be surprising. And again, you're not rooting or you don't want anybody to lose their job, but a team that's in the South that, whoever that next team is in the South that's looking for a rebuild, looking for a guy, he's going to be heavily considered. I think anywhere from, it's harder in the state of Texas, right? If you've never been there, if you haven't done stuff like that in the state of Texas, right? They're kind of their own breed. They want their own guy from the Midwest that they've heard of. But I think anywhere, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, up the coastline, any of those major programs, if they're at some point looking for a guy, or like we mentioned, if somebody like Nick Saban or Dabo go in a different direction at any point in time, he's going to be in heavy consideration. Because like I said, I mean, look at it, 10 years from now, he's 50.
Yeah.
So I mean, look at the possibilities of what that guy has in front of him. There are very few coaches in major college football right now who have a better vertical, game for their own careers than Billy Napier. And it's hopeful that teams will watch, because this is a great storyline in terms of an undefeated ULL team and what they've done at Coastal Carolina. In terms of the track record coming into this year, they play exciting football. And outside of the fact that I still have to Google and every time I see him play to figure out what a Chanticleer was, outside of not knowing what Coastal Carolina was doing with their logo and their nickname, they play exciting football. They've had really good quarterback play there, and they've had some hellified staff members there as well.
Yeah, that game's actually tomorrow night. Coastal Carolina at Louisiana, Lafayette, Louisiana, about a touchdown favorite. That Coastal Carolina team can score some points on the board, though, in a hurry. So that should be an exciting game.
Yeah, no doubt. And then you follow up Friday night. Shane Buechele and undefeated SMU is playing at Tulane, and that's been a spot that you don't want to go play on a Thursday or Friday night. But in this COVID era, it might be a little easier play. As we saw last year, Houston came in there with De'Ara King. Not only did they lose the game, but they lost De'Ara King. They lost to Tulane, which kind of put them on the outside looking in for the season. De'Ara King basically redshirted the week after losing to Tulane and never to be seen again. So I think that Friday night game, if you're around and you're watching, Shane Buechele is kind of the quiet of the three Texas quarterbacks. He's kind of the quiet one that continues to progress and put up good numbers. So Kellen Mond and Dellenger get all the kind of the pub, but Shane Buechele is doing a lot of good things at SMU. And we know that coming out of that program, you're well prepared for the next level at the quarterback spot. He has a chance to continue, driving that evaluation toward being kind of a draftable, even late draftable quarterback as compared to those other two guys who are still trying to find their foothold, with things. I think Buechele has taken a, kind of a step forward there out of those three guys.
Yeah, I think he'll be a Senior Bowl candidate. You mentioned Houston. They're also in action Friday night. It's a college football doubleheader. BYU, I think is coming into town, and they could romp Houston. We'll talk more about that on Friday. We'll have Big Law, of course, doing the Football Friday preview. We've got David Turner lined up for Thursday. I think we have some good guests lined up for tomorrow. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at NFL Draft Bible. Daniel Cassidy, I know you had a question about the Dwayne Haskins evaluation, and we spoke about this on the show where he was benched on the air a little bit, and I'm not sure it's really the fact that he's playing a spread wide open offense where you just kind of line up and go. You look over to the sideline, the receivers are reading the cards 1, 2, 3, which route to run. That's been going on, I think, now for the last 5 to 7 years. So there's a lot of quarterbacks coming out like that. I think our big deal was with 1-year starters at the collegiate level. It's now a major concern. Just going back, we talked about it the last 2 decades. the most successful one-year starter that's been drafted in the first round is essentially now Mitchell Trubisky and Mark Sanchez. And Dwayne Haskins is probably the third best one-year starter based on his body of work. So I think it's a legitimate concern. I think that while the evolution of quarterbacks at the NFL has completely changed the dynamics of what we look for, I still think the Bill Parcells philosophy still holds credence with some of the things he was looking for. We'll dive into that a little bit more tomorrow when we have some time to talk about it. But here we go. Another hour of power in the books, John. We'll be back on at it again. Parting shot for the people here.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that, I think, especially if you have, after this week, you see the teams that are in the situations that they're in. Atlanta drafted their franchise quarterback, 10 years ago and got a good run for their money in it. Houston has seen some success winning a division and things like that, but now has run their course with a coach. And then you have the New York situation where 2 out of the 3 teams in New York may have not gotten it correct. You see what happens when you eyeball your guy, you trust what you're doing, and you set it up around him to perform the way that you're doing things. There's a reason that Buffalo is having that success compared to the Jets and Giants. That is, you make your selection, and then once you do, you continue to put everything around it resource-wise in order to get what you put into it in terms of when you drafted him. You draft Josh Allen, you bring Brian Dabble in there to work with him, you draft a running back, you draft another running back, you keep improving the O-line, and then you go get him a home run hitter and Stephon Diggs. And what do you see every year? Josh Allen progression. What do you see? The commentary about athlete first, quarterback second. He's a thrower, not an accurate passer. He's never going to get to be a better accurate guy than he was in college. Put him with a quarterback coach. Put him in the right offensive system. Get him a ground game. Improve your O-line. And then get him a deep threat. And what are you seeing? What is it, a 10+% improvement that he's had? You look at him his first year in the NFL. You look at year 2 and 3, and the progression he's made is coming from taking the check down, making the open throws, not being so wild with the football in terms of, that hero style play. But when you look at those other teams, you haven't done that yet completely with Daniel Jones. You certainly haven't done it with Sam Darnold. And in Houston and Atlanta, you haven't hit on the right buttons to push to put all that around those guys. So it's not just the resource of having the smarts of who to draft, because anybody could draft Josh Allen in that scenario. The Bills' credibility is that as a front office, as a coaching staff, and as an organization, once you drafted him, you have put every proper component around Josh Allen to get to the point and time where you're at. That's why you're having the success you're having. Those other clubs, that's why you're struggling and on the verge of changing your head coach or GM.
Yeah, and, one quick follow-up point I'll just make. I'm not the biggest Daniel Jones or Sam Darnold supporter, but even without a supporting cast around him, even with a crappy offensive line, all of his playmakers, half of his playmakers injured, you saw Justin Herbert, again, carry his team on the back. And that's my point. Like, this is what great quarterbacks do. Even though he didn't win the game, he was in a shootout with Brady. He was in a shootout with Breeze. He puts the team on his back. I mean, he's handing the ball off to Justin Jackson and to Joshua Kelly. He's throwing it to Donald Parham. And yet he can will his team into the ballgame. Whereas I just don't remember a game in 2 or 3 years, 3 with Darnold and 2 with Jones, where they said, giddy up, boys, get on my back. I'm going to show you to the promised land. And I think at the end of the day, that's what makes a great quarterback, is the ability, when needed, to carry your team. And yes, you do have to have a supporting cast. Absolutely. You need an offensive line. No doubt about it. But, I mean, it's just what I see from Justin Herbert through 3 or 4 starts is more than I've seen out of Darnold or Jones in their entire career. And we'll leave that right there. Make sure you go see ya. Logging on late, Tony G, DC, DT, Charlie, All you guys in the chat room, people, will be back at it again tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, the State of Football, chopping it up. Your new home for real football talk in the morning. Of course, Saturdays, 10 a.m. Eastern. We've got the NFL Draft Tailgate Show, Friday Night Scout School going on with David Turner and Ryan Roberts. We've got Brian Baldinger, defensive line breakdown coming up October 28th. And don't forget, subscribe all access, 50% of all sales this week to NFL Draft Bible subscribers will be donated to the Red Cross Hurricane Delta Relief Fund. We appreciate everybody's love and support. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody.